Hello, this is Teresa and welcome back to my YouTube channel for a new card tutorial. I'll be showing you how I created this haunted castle card using some stamps from Crackerbox and Suzy stamps, and I'll show you how I colored this. Now I'm starting off with a piece of Ranger cardstock. It's the watercolor cardstock, and I'm going to be using two different Marvy markers. One is Sepia, which is what I'm using right now, that I'm writing, or rather dragging it across the stamp, being careful to avoid those little circles up at the top left hand side. And the next thing I will do is, after finishing with this marker, I'll pick up the African violet marker and I will go over most of the areas of the castle. Maybe not quite as much coverage as with Sepia, but for the most part I cover most of the stamp. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to be using a watercoloring method that I learned from Bonnie Krebs, actually from Art Impressions, and she uses these two colors in most of her projects, and I thought it would be the perfect way to bring out the colors in this castle and make it look kind of haunted looking and mysterious, which is the whole reason why I wanted to do the technique this way. So the best way to make this work is to use either a small watercolor brush, or I'm using a water brush with some water in it, but I make sure to remove the color or the majority of the water from the brush before just touching it down in different places onto the stamped image. Where there are lines, I tend to just kind of draw them out a bit. And in some cases, I'm just touching the brush to various parts of the image. So in not every case am I actually trying to drag color out. I just use the water brush to soften the stamped image. And in some of the places where there are lines, I do draw out the color. The combination of the sepia and the African violet together make this look like not just one solid color. So it does add a lot of interest to the castle image. As you can see, the way that this castle stamp was designed is it doesn't come all the way down on the right hand side, and it could be that the intent was to have a hillside there, but I'm going to slightly modify my version whenever I get past what I'm painting right now, and I'm just going over all the little stones in the path leading down to the bottom of the card. And I'll touch a few places on that large flag, although for the most part you may not really see it by the time I'm done. I'm going to draw a line with the fine point on the sepia pen, so I'm just kind of drawing a line downwards, so nothing too crazy. And I drew a line across to represent where it meets the ground. And then I'm using the African violet on top of it and just slightly tracing over the sepia. And then I decided I wanted at least one more line to kind of make it look like there's a little turret right there. And with the sepia pen, the fine end, I'm drawing a few little hash marks there along the sides of the walls to kind of imitate what was done on the stamp itself. And now I'm picking up the water brush and I'm going to do the same thing I've been doing all over the castle, which is drawing out color from the lines that I've drawn on there. And I will be doing something similar. This time I'm using a Tombow marker because this is the best green color I happen to have in my stash, and it's also water, not water reactive per se, but you can use water to blend it. And I'm just using the fine point in to add kind of like some texture, some blades of grass, if you will, all over the area in front of the castle. And I'll add a few of these as well on the other side of that stone path. And once I've added that on all that side, I'm going to add a few little blades of grass, so to speak, right around different areas of that stone path. Then I pick up the water brush again and I've squeezed out a bit of water so that I can get the green to kind of blend over the background and create the look of kind of a grassy hill. So I just use the water. You have a little bead of water, as you might be able to see over there on the right, that I just kind of pick up some more water when I need it instead of just squeezing it out on the card panel. I was a little worried about maybe getting too much at one time, so I wanted to better control it, and that's why I just squeezed out a little bit of water there on my glass medium map. And so now that I have finished the grassy area, the next area I'm going to work on is the sky, and what I want to create is a stormy looking sky. So I will put links to all the products used in the description box below, so if you're curious about anything that's used here, you can see the colors, what stamps I used, etc. So now I'm scribbling on some of this Tombow gray marker, and I'm using the waterbrush pen to start getting that color wet, and then I'm just going to work on moving it around until I've surrounded the castle area for the most part. I'm going to leave the top as dark as I can, so it's gradually going to get a bit lighter as I move down. And in some cases I skip some areas to create the impression of clouds, because I'm wanting a stormy looking sky and it needs a little bit of lighter areas to create that contrast and that overall feel. I'm just adding a little more of the gray color. I just scribbled it over there on the side of my mat and picked it up with the waterbrush pen, and adding more gray around the parts of the castle that I haven't gotten to yet. And basically at this point, it's just kind of a matter of how dramatic you want to make your sky, or lighter. It's just kind of up to you what kind of feel you want to get to it. And because I didn't want to wait for this to dry, I've pulled out my heat tool and I am drying the top of the panel. I am going to be adding a little more color towards the bottom, so there's a little bit darker, or the grass that's meeting up with the stone path towards the bottom will be a little bit darker. So I just scribble a little bit of the same green marker that I used before, picking it up with a water brush, and then I'm going to start at the bottom of the panel and just kind of drag it in to meet with the already colored lawn, hill, whatever you want to call it. And at this point I am actually almost finished with my background with this castle scene. I'll dry it off with the heat tool, and then the next thing I'm going to do is get my other stamps that I'm going to use to finish out the scene. And now I have my other stamps I'm going to use. I'm going to use this small little grouping of bats and the Happy Haunting Sentiment, and I'm going to stamp those with VersaFine Clair in Morning Mist. It's a nice dark gray color. So my thought behind using this color is that I would make the bats that are the smaller set of bats a little lighter in color, and then make the larger bat, which I'm now stamping, a lot darker so that it looks like it's more in the foreground of the photo. In a way, I wished I had stamped the smaller bats one time less, so they would have been a little more faded than they are, but it still turned out just fine. I still have a little bit of area in that largest bat that didn't get colored in because I am using textured paper. So I picked up one of these cool little tools where you can grab some ink from an ink pad and go in over an already stamped image, especially if it's a solid one, and make the image as solid as you'd like it to be. Now I'm going to be gluing this down onto a piece of gray cardstock, and before I did this I trimmed down the colored panel to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and now I'm struggling to get it on here straight. I mean, usually it's not too difficult. I get it on there right away, but this is just one of those days, I guess. So now that I have that together, I'm just going to add more liquid glue to the back of the panel, put it onto my side folding A2 size card base, and that is the card. I appreciate you joining me today, and if you liked this video, I hope you'll leave me a thumbs up or consider subscribing if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.